So my language literacy journey has been a scratch disc. Throughout its course, the timeline seems to jump back and forth, stop for a period of time, and skip ahead only to glitch back to before the pause even happened. This metaphor is extremely accurate, as I have been in multiple circumstances that have caused my journey to stop, exceed, or decline. So I'll be discussing my journey through early years, primary school, high school, and up to present day, all whilst informing you and reminding myself that a scratch disc can still work even if it's frustrating. So when you first put a disc into a CD player, you expect it to work smoothly and according to plan, and this is how my early childhood language development was. So as a millennial baby, I did grow up with a lot of multimedias around me, and the one that really sets apart my childhood from my parents' childhood was the TV. So I would remember always watching Play School, High Five, and The Wiggles, and I'd just be astounded by all the colours and sounds coming out from the cast. Now, this just allowed for some extra modelling and exposure to language, and really did help develop my syntax and phonology. So say, when they would say the word clap, it meant to put both your hands together to form a sound. Although I was exposed to the TV, I still did have a lot of formal and traditional language development. So I'm a second child, so I had a 7-year-old brother who would come home from school and play and talk to me. My mum was a stay-at-home mum, which meant she was always around, always trying to get us to enunciate our words just as she was. She would always be playing Queen and Shania Twain, as well as reading to us. And when my dad was home from work, he would always talk and play with us as well. And because of these models in my early childhood, I really feel as though my language development resonates with the behavioural perspective. So the behavioural perspective states that learning is shaped through environment, language is learnt through imitation, practice, feedback and reinforcement. So when I would say the word drink, my mum may have came over to me, given me a little cuddle, said good job, handed me my drink, and therefore made me want to repeat the behaviour again. Just to further that, behavioural perspective requires a rich environment and models, and I definitely did have both of these. So at the age of 3, I started kindergarten, and when I look back at this time, I always remember it as such a fun, relaxing and stimulating time in my life, as we would sing, read, play and craft for hours on end. This is also where I think my phonology became more disciplined, as when we would talk and mispronounce something, our teacher would detect it and just tell us how to pronounce it properly. It's also at kinder that I pinpoint my multimodal literacy start to blossom, more importantly, my visual literacy, as I would always spend hours in the arts and crafts corner, either painting or making little models and sculptures. It's also in kinder, when I was aged 4, that I started to dance. 3 times a week I would do my jazz, tap and ballet lessons. Now, I come from an English-speaking background. All my family and extended family also speak English. So by doing dance, I was actually exposed to another language, although I didn't know it, and that was French. So every time I would do a demi-plie or a pirouette, I was actually hearing the words in French and putting actions and meaning to those words. This again strengthened and highlighted the role multimodal literacy had in my development. More importantly, it meant that I was not solely focused on words and their meanings, but rather words and discovering the world around me and putting connections to these words and into a vocabulary bank that I would use throughout my life. So just to reiterate, my early childhood is that first 10 minutes of the disc that is going smoothly and just as according to plan. Though when the disc stops working and it starts to glitch a little bit until finally freezing, is exactly like my primary school experience. I started prep at age 5, I learned how to spell my name, I learned how to count to 100, and I learned that cat rhymes with Matt. Now, as I said before, I was lucky enough not to have to experience the traditional direct instruction learning environment my parents had, but rather a very inclusive and engaging inquiry-based learning experience, which meant I was very focused and motivated to go to school when I was younger. Though unfortunately in grade 1, my mum did get terminally ill, and suddenly I didn't care about nouns, verbs and adjectives, but rather what was a blood transfusion and how does it help my mum, and other medical terms that were always saturating my life. Before I started grade 2, my mum passed away and I missed a lot of school. So as a result, there are gaps in my education, just like a disc that has been jumping back and forth to the middle of the movie and back again. This is how I felt. I would understand a concept and go ahead of everybody else and then get confused and embarrassed maybe and come back, or most likely than not, fall behind everybody. We did weekly readers in my primary school, just to help with your syntax awareness and reading fluidity, but unfortunately I didn't get to do these very often as my dad would work late and I was in charge of taking care of my brother as well as cooking for the family. But this being said, although my traditional literacy lacked, I still had great creative and critical thinking abilities. I really thrived in art class. I could write extensive creative writing pieces even though my spelling was awful, but I did stop dance. Again, my tactile literacy was far more prevalent than other students my age, as I did cook dinner every single night. I would craft and I also liked to knit. So again, just needless to say, my primary school years were spent trying to make sense of knowledge, just like you would if your movie kept jumping back and forth due to the scratches. High school, unfortunately, was not much different for me. In year 7, I decided that I wasn't really going to focus in school. I still went, I wasn't a troublemaker, but I just thought I couldn't do the work as I missed so much in primary school and I wasn't confident in the transition from learning to read to reading to learn. But in year 7, I did realise the importance and started to understand pragmatics. I understood that I had to change my tone, my vocabulary and message when addressing my teachers and principals. I also started to experiment with language. We would talk to my peers on Messenger and use acronyms and slang. It wasn't until halfway through year 8 that my literacy journey actually started to develop again. I was obsessed with One Direction, and as a result, I actually fell into a world that I'm still very active in today, which is fan fiction. I'll spend all my time reading and night and day just reading on my phone. I've actually got a screenshot here from the other week that I had spent 15 hours on the reading app, so I very much enjoy that. Unfortunately, reading fan fiction did not help at all with my syntax awareness or spelling accuracy, as the stories are also written by teenagers and they're done very quickly. But I felt it very important to include, as it is the catalyst for my love of reading. The first novel I ever picked up and finished was Twilight. I read it in a matter of 2 days. Soon after, I went on to heavier subjects and I also discovered my love for classics. I read all of the Jane Austen works in my first year of year 9 and I just became obsessed with it. As a result of reading, I became far more confident in my vocabulary and what I put onto paper to hand in for my assignments, and I could finally break down my maths questions, something I could never do before. I received all A's in English from year 9 to year 12, and my creative piece of Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol ranked 3rd in a national competition. It was also in high school that I acquired another language, which was German. My school offered it as an elective and I was determined to finish it throughout. So my language literacy journey had jumped ahead of everybody else. I was ahead of my peers. I was motivated and engaged, but unfortunately in year 10, I developed some pretty severe mental health issues. And like a disc, it collects dust, slowly eroding, slowly scratching the surface, but it's barely noticeable to the human eye, and that's what was happening to me. I had 4 BCE subjects in year 12, which meant that I couldn't receive the ATAR I needed to get into my course unless I worked incredibly hard. But luckily I did, and I also received a scholarship to La Trobe University, and it just seemed that the disc that was playing to represent my journey was going at its expected rate, finally. So here I am today in my 2nd year of university. I still struggle a lot with academic writing, as it is a deep passion for mine to try and be creative. I struggle a lot with structuring formal emails. The conventions of it seem to get jumbled in my head. I find it very hard to adapt to group work and collaborative assignments, as I am a very independent learner. I still find myself self-conscious when spelling, and this was reflected in my BKSB. Although I did pass initial assessment and I'm at working level, it still suggested that I work on my grammatical and spelling skills. I continue to read, craft and evaluate texts, as this is my hobby and my literary strengths. So just in summary, my language and literacy journey has been a scratch disc. It started off as expected, with my acquisition of language coming from models and exposure to multimodal literacies around me. It began to stop, jump forward, move back throughout primary school. The disc proceeded at a normal rate before skipping ahead when I started reading, only to glitch again when I developed mental health issues. Now, the metaphor is still relevant as I develop my tertiary literacies. I continue to work on conventions, pragmatics, and persevere even when the disc stops working.